Welcome to Giving Feedback on Students' Work. I am Dr. Chris Stillwell. By the end of this video, participants will be able to list characteristics of effective feedback on student work, describe AI tools that give instant feedback, use AI to create a rubric to make grading transparent, give comments that increase learning, get AI assistance in writing those comments, provide reasons for caution in the use of AI for such comments, and describe a cycle of creating comments with and without AI assistance. Let's start by thinking about what are the qualities of effective feedback. First, it should be timely. Students ideally don't wait a long time. They get the feedback, they remember what they said and what they were thinking, and they're able to improve their understanding. It should be specific, not general, so that students really know what to focus on. And it should be noticed by the student, of course. If they don't see it or think about it very much, it might be a waste of everyone's time. So we can change our focus here just a little bit and say, maybe there are 4 things we're going to think about in this video about ways to give useful feedback. First thing is, what are some immediate ways? What are some ways that rubrics can help in this whole situation? And we will talk about what rubrics are. Comments. How do we make good comments? And how can AI perhaps help? And reflection. What does that look like? This reflection piece where students think about the feedback they got and it makes a difference. Now, this is a video about AI. So what are the ways AI can help? Well, I'll share some AI tools that can be very immediate. I'll share ways to create rubrics with AI. We'll look into perhaps AI helping us to even write comments on students' work. But the reflection piece where students think about the feedback and use it to improve their knowledge and their performance, no AI for that, please. Okay, let's focus on that first one, the immediate feedback, this instant feedback. There are 2 tools that I'm interested in. First one is by Mr. Nguyen Nhu Anh, and I'm sorry, my pronunciation is not very good there. He's a very good guy, though, and he has put together a website for teachers in Vietnam to create activities. And so these activities are things like crossword puzzles and quizzes and games that pose questions to the students, and they have to, use their knowledge to answer these questions, and they get immediate feedback on how they're doing. So that's one thing I invite everyone to explore. Another one that's currently free is Reading Coach. And this is one where students can read a passage and the AI listens to them, and it gives feedback on the parts where they struggle, the parts where they had trouble reading, or where their pronunciation was not correct. And it gives them exercises based on that. And it's all instant, it's immediate. So that's another fun thing to explore. All right, now I mentioned rubrics earlier. This can be a great way to make our work of grading a little bit easier and maybe also better for the students. So here's an example of a rubric. If you look on the left side here, you see we've got a category of 4 different things we're looking for when we look at an essay or a paragraph in this case. The response, the task response, how well did they do what was asked for? Organization, is their paragraph well organized? The language use, do they have good vocabulary and grammar? And the mechanics, how about the punctuation, capitalization, and spelling? So for example, let's say that in my class, I asked students to write about food and play, and one of my students wrote a paragraph like this, and I want to give them a score. So I can look at their paragraph, and I can look at my rubric, and I can think about, did they really write about food and play, or did they talk about other things? And when I look at it more closely, I see that there's a reference to my brother eats this stuff every morning. I'm not sure if that's really a good match for the paragraph overall, but most of the other parts are decent. So I will give this one a score of 3, where it's mostly on topic, but there are some gaps. And then I can go to the organization section, and I can think about how good is the organization here. And when I look closely, I say, yeah, there's some structure, there's some connection, but it could be better. Language use, I can think about the grammar, the vocabulary. And when I look closely, I see some errors, nothing terrible. So again, I'm putting this one in a 3. But when I look at the mechanics, I actually don't see any mistakes with the punctuation or the capital letters or spelling. So in this case, I might give a 5. And that's just one example. And I can do this for all of my students. And it helps me to be kind of transparent about what I'm doing. And it's good for me in a few ways. So let's look at that more closely. Right. So the first thing is a rubric tells everyone how the assignment will be graded. Right. And it's good for open-ended writing tasks or spoken presentations. It identifies what parts of this task really matter the most. It helps me as the instructor know where to focus. I can get distracted or overwhelmed by so many assignments to look at. This can help me focus. And when I give the scores on a rubric, the student can then look at the rubric and they will get a form of detailed feedback right away from that. So in other words, the rubrics make grading efficient and more consistent across all of the students. Now, this is also really good in Vietnam. If we look at the guidelines, the 5512 documents, we see an interesting phrase in there. And the phrase is, students must be informed in advance about the evaluation criteria. And so if we can tell students in advance about the rubrics that we're using, this is a great way to be transparent, to let students know what they need to do and how they can succeed on an assignment. Now, of course, how did I get that rubric? I can go to AI, I can go to something like Gemini, and I can go into that window at the bottom and I can type in, I need a rubric to grade a short spoken presentation, for example. And just like that, it will generate something for me very, very quickly. Now, my request was not very detailed, though, and so I can't really expect this response to be in my class. I think we know that a better prompt, a better request to the AI will get something that's matched to our classes. So that might look something like assigning the role of you're an expert in speaking assessment for secondary schools in Vietnam. I want you to make a rubric for a short spoken presentation, right? And then the context, we can give lots of details of it's grade 8, what's the presentation about, how long is it, and what do we want in those 4 rows, right? So you see there at the bottom, it says focus on the content and ideas, organization, pronunciation and fluency, and the delivery, right? So I can decide what I want, and I can get AI to help me fill in the details. Finally, I can describe the format and style. I want the table to have 4 columns for the points, and I want the points to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 points. I can change those numbers, whatever I want, but this is the format that I'm asking for as well. And when I go into this much detail about what I'm asking for, I get a rubric that is more matched to what I'm looking for. And of course, I can continue the dialogue and say, I want the 4 points to be on the left and the 1 point to be on the right. I can ask for other things, or I can simply fix them myself. Here's another example. And what I like about this one, we're creating a writing rubric. And I just want to show you that if we go to the context here, we can think about that document 5512, and maybe we remember that it talks about learning at different levels of thinking, lower order and higher order. And so we can ask for the rubric to incorporate that into the 4 levels of recognition, comprehension, application, and high application levels. These are the kinds of things that we are often trying to assess in our classes in Vietnam. And of course, we can be specific about the format as well. Again, we get a rubric that is tailored to what we looked for, but we can still make improvements to it. Now, once we have a good rubric and we're happy with it, we can start using it for grading, but it's really best if we can also add a comment. So students might get these numbers and they can look at the rubric, but if you can add a few words to say what was good about it, where they can work on improving things, that will help the students learn even more. So let's focus now on some principles for giving comments. And so the first one is we want to think about, before you give criticism and suggestions, ask yourself what the student did well. Students appreciate a mix of positive comments and helpful suggestions. One approach is the sandwich method. This begins with some bread. At the beginning, we give very positive comments. And then the meat part is where we say, there are some things you can work on. Here are some specific things that you could try to improve. And then we've closed with some more bread, a positive comment to end things on a nice note. And so if we're asking AI to help us, we would ask AI to probably follow the same kind of format. And so here's an example. I've got a paragraph by a student, and maybe I will ask AI to help me. But what should we do first before we ask AI for help? I hope you've got an idea in mind. The idea in my mind is you read the paragraph yourself and you form your own opinion. This is very important. If we only go to AI directly, that's going to kind of anchor the AI's ideas in our mind, and it will be harder to think of our own original ideas and access what we really wanted for this. So it's important to begin without the AI, look at the paragraph, and get our own ideas first. Then we can ask for help from an AI grading assistant. We can create one with a detailed prompt, right? So we give it a role, we give it the task of looking at things, we give it the context and even some documents perhaps to look at for what the assignment is about. And then the format here is what I want to focus on a little bit more. We can say start with a positive comments, 2 or 3 improvement suggestions, also focus a little bit on grammar and spelling, punctuation, and then finally a positive closing comment. So I'll let you pause and look at this prompt a little bit more closely if you like, but those are some things that we might ask for. And remember that last part there is called the sandwich approach to giving feedback. All right, so here's the example. I give it to ChatGPT in this case, and it says, sure, give me the paragraph. Let's go. So I give it the paragraph, and very quickly it does as I asked, positive comment, some suggestions, and a positive closing comment. It even labeled them for me. And the idea here is that maybe I would copy this and find a way to share this with the student. Well, that's one approach. There are also some techniques for using other tools. For example, Brisk Teaching is very interesting. If you go to their site, it's free. You can install it into your Chrome browser. And when you do it first, here I'm looking at the student's paragraph in a Google document, and that's one way to make this work nicely. And you'll see that I don't see Brisk Teaching anywhere. And that's because what I need to do first is I have to go up into the extensions box here, and I need to find Brisk Teaching, and I need to pin it. And once I do, now you'll see that it's available at the top there, right? So I can turn it on. So if I click on it, I turn it on, and then it appears on the bottom right. If I click on the bottom right, I get my menu. And now we can do all kinds of things when we're looking at websites. We can create lesson plans and all those things. But in this case, I'm interested in feedback. So if I click on Give Feedback, I have the option to use rubric criteria. I can upload the rubric that I just made. So that's what I'll do. I'll go in here, and first I'll decide the grade level. I'll change 4th grade to 11th grade, for example. And then I will click on rubric, and it will let me open my documents and choose the rubric that I want. And then you can see, there it is. It's got the paragraph rubric. And if I'm ready, I click on Brisket, and very quickly it looks at it, and it gives me feedback on those areas: the content ideas, the organization, the vocabulary, the grammar, and accuracy. Now remember, we cannot, of course, accept this feedback without a close look at what's going on here. So what we need to do next is check it, and we say, it looks pretty complex, actually. Can you simplify the language? Remember, my students are A2 level here. And so once you ask for that, it will try again. And we can have a continuing conversation to keep trying to improve it. Or here's another thing we can do. We can go back, we can click back here, and we can try the glow and grow option. And in that case, it's closer to the sandwich approach right away. So again, I click on Brisket, and it starts with glow. These are the positive comments, things that were good about the paragraph. And then the grow, these are the substantive comments, the things that the student can try to improve, and they should be specific. What they add here is wondering, some questions for the student to consider as they rewrite their paragraph, some things that might inspire them to make some interesting changes. Okay, so we've talked about 2 different approaches to getting AI comments, right? I can make an elaborate prompt, and I can interact with ChatGPT directly, or Gemini, or anything else, or I can use something like Brisk. But what could be some issues? What could be some drawbacks to this? We really need to keep this in mind. First of all, the first thing you might be thinking of is that the feedback might not be accurate, or it might not be consistent. Maybe one student's getting really good feedback from the AI, and another student's paragraph is not. What's the quality here? And so this is why we have to be so deeply involved in looking at things. But there's more. How will our students feel if we are using AI for grading? Do you think they're going to be happy about that? Or are they going to feel like we're not doing our jobs? How do we explain our reasons? If we don't have good reasons, then this could be a problem, and it might lead to them feeling like they should use AI for bad reasons as well. What about legality? Is it legal to share students' work with AI? What are the student privacy concerns? Do we need students' and parents' permission? These are all things we need to think about before we go down this path. And so one way to think about it is we're in a world right now where we are concerned that students might be abusing AI, that they might be using AI to do the hard work of learning and effectively sleeping through their education and learning nothing. And this could be happening across our classes. And so what happens next? Well, we would think that maybe the teacher has to do something about this. But what should the teacher do? Is it okay for the teacher, for instance, to use AI in their instruction? Or if the teacher is using AI and the students are using AI as well, then what kind of a world are we looking at here? Is education happening at all? Or are we sort of just ruining the whole thing? These are some deeper questions that we need to consider. And it makes a big difference in how we think about our own use as teachers of AI as a grading assistant. So I would say that some considerations about the use of AI for grading are that we want to be transparent about it. Students are going to notice if we suddenly have amazing feedback for them and they will probably figure out that we're using AI. I don't think there's a good reason for not being transparent here. It can be a teachable moment where we explain that there are good times to use AI and bad times, and we need to have very good principles. So we can explain our reasons for using AI and how we will use it. For example, in a class where maybe students give a lot of assignments, you might say, for example, let's say the class has 5 assignments. You might say on the second assignment, I'm going to let us use AI so you can get immediate feedback. Now, the AI will help me in giving you comments and help me be faster about getting back to you, but I'm still going to be the boss and all those kinds of things. So I'm going to have the oversight. I can commit to checking the feedback for accuracy and adjusting for the student's level. And I can make clear that all final decisions come from me. I'm going to be I'm not going to sleep in the back of the classroom and letting a robot do everything. I'm very engaged, but this AI can help me maybe catch some gaps in my own thinking, and it can help me be faster. It can be sort of like an assistant. We also need to think about the data privacy and security. And so we might avoid entering students' names and certainly ID numbers and personal details. That's certainly a good idea, right? We want to avoid that. We can anonymize the work, remove all that kind of information, and we can only limit ourselves to only using approved AI platforms that follow the schools and MOET's privacy rules. Okay, now the last thing we can think about here is, what does this look like then if we have AI assistance in giving feedback to students on their work? So the first thing is we're giving our reasons for using AI. We're hopefully having a very good rationale for how this is improving our instruction and not amounting to us going on vacation. And we're giving students permission. And maybe we're giving students an option to say, no, I don't want you to share my work with AI, in which case they don't get the AI enhanced feedback, but they still get feedback. We can commit to limiting our use of AI comment writing assistance, right? So in my example, maybe there are 5 assignments, maybe on the second assignment, and maybe on the 4th assignment, I will use AI to enhance what I'm doing, but on other times I might commit to not using it at all. Everybody can find different solutions, but we want to have some rationale. Always evaluate the student's work on your own first, so that you've got your own ideas. You are the professional, you are the expert, you are the one teaching the class, not the AI. So you look at it, you get a sense of where they need work, and then get the AI feedback according to a good prompt or a good rubric on risk, perhaps. And then you look at that feedback and you evaluate what's good about the AI feedback and where it is lacking. We have to watch out. Many times the AI feedback will focus on superficial things like the grammar and the spelling, and it might miss the deeper, higher order thinking that is so important to actual learning. Okay. After all that, we can revise our prompt, ask the AI to try again and give different kinds of feedback, and we might get better results from the AI. We can always have that dialogue. Then we look at our original feedback and we can make improvements. So one thing that's worked nicely for me is I've found that sometimes I'm giving feedback to students on their work and I'm feeling a little stuck. And at some point I've gotten kind of a rough draft of what I want to say to the student. And then I ask AI to give its version of the feedback. And sometimes it points out some gaps that I missed. Sometimes it gives me a spark of an idea, and I end up improving what I'm writing. And I don't know if I've ever actually copied and pasted anything from AI, but I have gotten new ideas from this process of sort of using the AI as a grading assistant or a kind of a partner. Finally, we need to share the feedback and discuss it with the students. Remember this problem that if we're going through all this trouble to get good feedback for the students and they don't actually think about it very much, then there's a lot of wasted time there, right? And so I recommend dedicating time in class for students looking at the feedback and maybe writing a response to you about it, about what they like about it, what questions they have, what plans they have to use the feedback in the future, things like that. But definitely having 5-10 minutes for students to look at the feedback and discuss it with you is a minimum, I would think. Okay, so we've got these objectives that we started with, but remember, this is a lesson about assessment. So instead of just going through and saying, I'm sure we did these things, let's make it a self-assessment. So instead of saying you'll be able to do that, can you? Are you able to list characteristics of effective feedback on student work? Are you able to describe AI tools that give instant feedback? You might want to pause the video and think about it for a moment. Are you able to use AI to create a rubric to make grading transparent? What about giving comments that increase learning? Do you remember what that might look like? And how can we get AI assistance in writing comments? What are some reasons for caution in using AI for comments. And then finally, at the end of the video, we had a cycle of creating comments with and without AI assistance. Do you remember those pieces, the steps? There were a bunch of steps in there. All right, well, I hope this video has been useful, and I want to say thank you very much for joining me.